The first laugh came before the black cloth had finished falling. It was not loud. No one in the long gallery of Norchester House would have risked open cruelty beneath the painted gaze of 6 generations of dukes. It was a startled, breathless sound behind a jeweled fan, followed by the faint collision of a spoon against a porcelain saucer. Then came silence. London, the 28th April, 1857. Outside, carriage wheels rolled through Mayfair beneath a pale spring sky. Inside, candlelight trembled across gilded frames, polished floors, and the faces of men and women who had been invited to witness the Duke of Norchester's return to society. Miss Sophia Redmayne stood near the musician's screen at the far end of the gallery, where a working gentlewoman might observe without appearing to seek notice. Beside her, the Dowager Marchioness of Leyden rested both hands upon the silver head of her cane. Lady Leyden had brought Sophia as a guest, not a servant, though several women had already glanced at the modest grey silk of Sophia's gown and decided otherwise. Sophia was accustomed to such decisions. She earned her living painting portrait miniatures and restoring pictures whose owners often valued the frame more than the face within it. Society admired art most when it did not have to acknowledge the artist. At the center of the gallery, Lady Constance Duncombe stood beside the newly unveiled portrait of her nephew. She wore violet velvet and an expression of solemn triumph. "His Grace," she announced, "as he returned to us from the Crimea." The portrait was nearly life-sized. Augustus Duncombe, 8th Duke of Norchester, had been painted in a dark military coat, one gloved hand resting upon the back of a carved chair. The scars along the left side of his face had not been concealed. They had been transformed. A blackened hollow surrounded the left eye. The line at his mouth bent into something close to a sneer. Grey-green shadow lay across his skin, draining it of warmth, while the darkness behind him pressed his figure forward, as though he were emerging from a threat. The painter had not shown a wounded man. He had shown society the monster it had hoped to find. Another laugh escaped, softer than the first. A gentleman cleared his throat to cover it. One young woman whispered, "How dreadful!" though her eyes remained fixed upon the ruined cheek with the avidity of someone watching a forbidden spectacle. Sophia did not look at the guests. She looked at the paint. Light from the nearest branch of candles slid across the portrait's surface. Most of the coat and background reflected it in a soft, even haze. Around the Duke's left eye, however, the darkness caught the flame with a sharper gleam. The mouth did the same. 2 surfaces, 2 stages of work, perhaps 2 intentions. "You have gone very still," Lady Leyden murmured. Sophia kept her voice low. "The face is not painted in one hand." "You are certain?" "Not yet." Across the room, Lady Constance invited the company closer. "My nephew has never asked that his injuries be softened for delicate eyes." House Duncombe does not hide from truth. Her words carried just far enough to make admiration obligatory. Several guests nodded. A baron near the front said the portrait possessed remarkable force. His wife looked away too late to disguise her amusement. Sophia studied the painted scar that crossed the left cheek. That portion was honest enough. The ridged line followed the pull of flesh and bone, yet the shadow beneath it was too deliberate, too theatrical. It forced the eye downward toward the twisted mouth. Whoever had added that darkness understood exactly how to turn injury into character. Cruelty had been painted around the scars, not within them. A movement near the open doors drew every head. Augustus Duncombe had entered the gallery. He was taller than the portrait suggested, and more controlled than any painted figure could be. His evening coat was black, his linen severe, his posture without visible weakness. The scars began at his left temple, narrowed the eye slightly, crossed his cheek, and continued along the jaw toward the high edge of his cravat. They were pale against his skin. They did not make his mouth cruel. They did not make his face lifeless. For one suspended moment, no one spoke. Augustus looked first at the portrait. He did not flinch. He gave no sign that the image surprised him, though the hand at his side closed once before becoming still again. Then he turned toward the room. His gaze moved from the lady with the jeweled fan to the gentleman who had praised the portrait's force, then to Lady Constance. No one laughed now. "The viewing is concluded," he said. His voice was quiet, but it traveled the length of the gallery. Lady Constance's smile held. "Augustus, our guests have only just begun to appreciate Mr. Sedgley's achievement. They have appreciated enough. This exhibition was arranged in your honor. Then I am honored to end it." A footman near the door moved at once. Another followed, opening the way toward the entrance hall. The guests hesitated only until Augustus looked toward them again. Fans closed. Teacups returned to trays. Conversation began in broken fragments as titles and jewels drifted toward the doors. The Duke crossed to the nearest footman. "No sketch of that portrait is to leave this house. No description is to be given to a printer, publisher, or dealer. Is that understood?" "Yes, Your Grace." Lady Constance stepped nearer. "You cannot command people to forget what they have seen." "No, I can only discover why they were invited to see it." Something passed over her face. It vanished too quickly for anyone without practice in observing portraits to name it. Sophia saw it. So did the Duke. His gaze settled upon her for the first time. She had expected suspicion. Men of rank often disliked being examined by those they had not chosen to notice. Instead, he looked at her as though trying to recall whether she had laughed. Sophia held his gaze. She did not offer pity. Pity would have been another form of staring. "Miss Redmayne," Lady Leiden said, providing the introduction the room required, "is an artist and picture restorer." Augustus's attention shifted briefly to the Dowager Marchioness, then returned to Sophia. "You were looking at the portrait rather closely." "Yes, Your Grace, and yet not at the part everyone else found so compelling." Sophia knew Lady Constance was listening. She also knew that the safe answer would be praise. "I was looking at the light upon the surface." A slight pause followed. "What did it tell you?" "That the darkness around your eye may not belong to the same stage of painting as the coat beneath it." Lady Constance gave a small laugh, polished enough to pass for indulgence. "Miss Redmayne restores miniatures. Mr. Sedgley is one of the most fashionable portraitists in London." Sophia inclined her head. "Fashion does not change the way varnish catches a flame." Augustus looked back at the portrait. Candlelight flashed again over the blackened eye and the hard line of the mouth. His expression did not alter, but the gallery seemed to tighten around his silence. Two footmen approached the canvas, awaiting instruction. "Remove it from the wall," he said. "Take it to the East Studio. The doors are to be locked." Lady Constance's composure thinned. "That is unnecessary. Then it will cause you little inconvenience." The footman lifted the portrait with care. As it turned, the painted face disappeared from view, leaving only the raw linen backing and the heavy wooden frame. The room breathed differently without it. Augustus watched until the canvas had passed through the side doors. Then he looked once more at Sophia. There was no gratitude in his expression. Gratitude would have come too soon. There was recognition instead. She had seen something others had missed, and he had noticed. Lady Leiden touched Sophia's arm. Their carriage had been called. They had nearly reached the gallery doors when Lady Constance spoke behind them. "Miss Redmayne, you will remain." Sophia turned. Constance stood beneath the empty space where the portrait had hung. "If you possess the skill Lady Leiden claims, perhaps you can make his grace presentable before the season sees him again." Lady Constance waited until the last murmur of departing guests had faded beyond the gallery doors before she turned fully towards Sophia. The empty wall behind her seemed almost brighter without the portrait, yet the insult of it remained in the room. Lady Leiden had not moved toward the entrance hall. She stood beside Sophia with the patient stillness of a woman who had survived enough seasons to recognize an ambush. Before the first polite word was spoken, Augustus had stepped into the adjoining passage to speak with his steward, leaving the gallery doors open behind him. Lady Constance glanced in that direction, then lowered her voice. "You saw what happened." Sophia looked toward the space where the portrait had hung. "Yes, my lady. Then you understand the urgency." Constance moved closer. The violet velvet of her gown whispered over the polished floor. "London has endured war reports, casualty lists, and widows in mourning. It has no appetite for carrying the battlefield into every drawing room. My nephew must be made acceptable again." Sophia heard the care with which the sentence had been constructed. Not healed, not respected, acceptable. "The portrait can be examined," she said. "That is not what I asked." Constance lifted one gloved hand and traced an invisible line beside her own cheek. "The scar at the temple can remain faintly. Society admires courage when it is tastefully suggested. The rest should be softened. The skin must be warmed. The eye should be opened. The mark along the jaw can disappear beneath a better shadow." Lady Leiden's cane touched the floor once. "You speak as though Miss Redmayne were altering a gown. I speak as one responsible for the standing of this house." Constance's gaze did not leave Sophia. A face can be corrected as readily as a sleeve, provided the person holding the brush has sufficient judgment. Sophia felt the old warning tighten within her. A working woman survived by recognizing which truths would cost her employment. She had learned to accept condescension without answering every slight. She had learned that patrons often wanted the appearance of honesty while paying for concealment. Yet, the image in the gallery had crossed a line no quiet compromise could restore. "The scars are not what made that portrait cruel," she said. Constance's expression hardened by less than an inch. "I beg your pardon." Sophia kept her hands still before her. "The scar itself follows the structure of his Grace's face. It is the darkness around the eye that makes him appear threatening. The shadow beneath the mouth creates the sneer. The grey cast across the skin makes him look almost lifeless. Those choices do not describe an injury. They instruct the viewer how to judge the man who bears it. You presume a great deal from candlelight. I said what I observed. You said it in the house of a duke." Lady Leiden shifted nearer to Sophia, but Sophia did not look away. Constance continued, "Your father painted provincial families who wished to seem grander than they were. You repair. Cracked miniatures and faded ladies. Do not mistake familiarity with varnish for authority over House Duncombe." The mention of her father landed where Constance intended. Sophia saw again the narrow studio where he had worked through winter light, saving pigments until every color had to earn its place. He had dyed with unpaid bills and clean brushes. He had also taught her that a likeness could flatter without lying, and that an artist who erased truth for comfort eventually erased the subject altogether. My father taught me enough to know when paint has been used as punishment, Sophia said. If that means I am not suitable for your purpose, then I must decline it. Silence entered the gallery. Constance's eyes narrowed. You would refuse a commission from this family. I would refuse any commission that required me to conceal what a man survived while preserving what another person invented about him. Lady Leiden drew a quiet breath. Behind the open doorway, a floorboard gave the faintest sound. Sophia did not turn. Constance heard it as well, but pride had already carried her too far. You speak of survival as though society owes him admiration merely because he returned scarred. No, Sophia said. Society owes him the decency not to laugh. Augustus stepped into the gallery. He had removed his gloves. The scar along his left temple caught the light without the blackened exaggeration of the portrait. His expression revealed nothing, but Constance's shoulders changed. Only slightly. It was enough. How much did you hear? She asked. Enough. His voice was quiet. He looked first at his aunt, then at Sophia. You were asked to remove the scars. Sophia inclined her head. Yes, Your Grace. And you refused. Yes, Constance recovered quickly. I asked Miss Redmayne to exercise discretion. She has mistaken stubbornness for principle. Augustus crossed the gallery until he stood where the portrait had been displayed. Who gave you authority to alter the terms of Sedgley's commission? I arranged the exhibition. I have managed this house's social obligations since before you inherited. That was not my question. Constance's jaw tightened. Someone must consider what London sees when it looks at you. London saw what you placed before it. The words were not raised. They did not need to be. From this moment, you will give no instruction concerning that portrait. You will not enter the East Studio without my permission. You will not communicate with Mr. Sedgley in the name of House Duncombe. Augustus, you are allowing a tradeswoman to set herself above your family. Sophia felt Lady Leiden stiffen beside her. Augustus did not. Miss Redmayne has done nothing of the kind. You attempted to set yourself above me. Constance's face lost colour, though only for a heartbeat. You will regret humiliating me for the sake of a stranger. Then I shall regret it privately. He turned to Sophia. The force of his attention was different now, less guarded, more exact. Can you determine whether the shadows you described were added after the rest of the work? Sophia chose her answer with care. Possibly. The surface must be examined in daylight. A small cleaning test may show whether the darker glaze lies above an older layer. I would need the painter's folio, any preliminary studies, and a witness present during every examination. You do not trust me. I do not yet know you, Your Grace. More importantly, if the work is later disputed, my word alone will not outweigh Mr. Sedgley's reputation or Lady Constance's rank. Lady Leiden's mouth softened with approval. Augustus regarded Sophia for a long moment. Most powerful men disliked hearing the limits of their protection. He seemed to be measuring whether those limits were real. What else? He asked. The examination must take place in full daylight. No portion of the portrait is to be altered before I record its present condition. Any cleaning must begin in the background, where a test cannot damage the likeness. Lady Leiden or another professional witness must remain present. Agreed. Sophia had expected negotiation. There is one further condition. Name it. She looked directly at the scar crossing his cheek. His left eye narrowed slightly, not in anger, but from habit, as though he had learned to prepare for the moment Another person looked too long. If I accept the work, I will not remove the scars. Constance made an incredulous sound. Augustus remained still. Even if I ask you to, if you ask me to correct an error in paint, I will do what skill permits. If you ask me to pretend your face was never injured, I will return the commission. The gallery seemed to wait with him. Then Augustus nodded once. The scars remain. Something inside, Sophia eased, though she had not known it was braced. He moved to the bell pull and summoned the steward. When the man appeared, Augustus gave his instructions without looking away from Sophia. Mr. Sedgley's folio, studies, invoices, and all materials connected to the portrait are to be collected tonight. They will be placed in the East Studio. The portrait is already there and will remain locked. At 9:09 tomorrow morning, the room will be opened for Miss Redmayne, Lady Leiden, and my household secretary. No one else enters. The steward bowed. Yes, Your Grace. A written commission will be prepared before they arrive. Miss Redmayne is to be named as the appointed restorer and examiner. Lady Constance took one step forward. You cannot mean to hand your likeness to a woman who has already defied you. Augustus looked at Sophia, and for the first time the severity in his face gave way to something quieter. Not warmth, not yet. Recognition. On the contrary, he said, she appears to be the only person in this house who has refused to make it easier to look at by making it false. At 9 the next morning, the locked door of the East Studio opened upon a face. Augustus had once approved and apparently forgotten. The room occupied the quiet rear corner of Norchester House, where tall windows admitted a cool northern light that revealed every flaw without warming it into kindness. The full portrait stood upon a heavy easel near the center, turned slightly away from the windows and covered with a plain cloth. Beside it rested 2 wooden cases, a leather folio, several wrapped brushes, and the account papers gathered from Mr. Sedgley's former workroom in the house. Sophia entered with Lady Leiden. Augustus was already there with his household secretary, Mr. Vale, who stood at a writing table, prepared to record every object opened and every alteration proposed. No one had touched the portrait since the footman carried it from the gallery the previous evening. Sophia confirmed that first. The cloth had been tied around the frame with narrow tape, and the steward's wax seal remained unbroken over the knot. You asked for witnesses, Augustus said. You have 2. And the room, Sophia asked, locked throughout the night. The steward held the only key. She looked toward the covered canvas. Then we may begin, Mr. Vale broke the seal under her observation and noted the time. 2 footmen removed the cloth, exposing the painted figure to the merciless daylight. The transformation was even uglier than it had appeared beneath candles. The grey cast across Augustus's face seemed colder. The darkness around the left eye had a greasy depth. The painted mouth bent downward in a way the living mouth did not. Augustus stood opposite his own likeness without speaking. In daylight, the difference between man and portrait became almost insulting. The real scars were pale and irregular, drawn by injury rather than design. They narrowed his left eye slightly and crossed his cheek toward the jaw. Nothing in them suggested cruelty. Sophia approached the canvas but stopped before touching the frame. I will examine the surface first. No cleaning today. Augustus inclined his head. Do what is required. She moved from one side to the other, changing her angle to the light. A soft reflection lay over the coat, chair, and background. Around the eye and mouth, however, the gloss sharpened. She lifted a small magnifying lens from her case and studied the boundary where the dark paint met the older flesh tones. The later surface did not fully settle into the fine cracks beneath it. The shadow was added after the face had begun to dry, she said. Mr. Vale's pen moved across the page. Lady Leiden remained seated near the open connecting door, her cane beside her chair. Augustus watched Sophia rather than the portrait. "Can you prove that?" "Not yet. I can show that the surface behaves differently. A cleaning test may prove more, but only after I know what the original design looked like." Sophia turned toward the leather folio. "May I? It belongs to the commission," Augustus said. "You have authority to inspect it." She untied the worn ribbons. The first sheets were ordinary studies of the carved chair, a military coat, a hand resting upon dark wood. Beneath them lay charcoal arrangements of the full pose in those sketches. Augustus stood squarely, with his shoulders level and his expression unreadable. There was no threatening lift to the left side of his body. No unnatural sneer. Sophia laid each sheet upon the table in the order found while Mr. Vale recorded the sequence. Near the back of the folio, a stiff board had been wrapped in tissue and placed between two unfinished background studies. Sophia lifted it carefully. The tissue opened around a small oil painting no larger than a writing page. Augustus, painted from the shoulders upward, faced slightly toward the light. The scars were present, every one of them, yet the expression was composed and weary rather than hard. The left eye held caution, not menace. The mouth was straight. A faint warmth remained in the skin. At the lower right corner appeared Sedgley's signature and the date, the 19th August 1856. Augustus went still. Sophia looked at him. "You know this study?" He crossed the room slowly. "Yes." The single word carried more weight than surprise. "I sat for it at Rookwood Abbey last summer. Sedgley said it would guide the larger work. Did you approve it?" "I did." His gaze remained on the small painted face. "It was the only likeness he showed me." Lady Leiden's voice was gentle. "You never saw the completed portrait before last evening?" "No." Augustus looked toward the full canvas. Sedgley claimed the final varnish required quiet, and that moving the picture before the London season would risk the surface. My aunt arranged everything after it arrived. Sophia placed the oil study on a padded stand beside the larger portrait. The difference was immediate. Both images showed the same scars, the same narrowed left eye, the same strong line of the jaw. Only one had turned suffering into threat. "The approved study gives us the original intention," she said. "Not proof of every stroke beneath the glaze, but a standard for comparison." Augustus looked from the study to the portrait. "Then the man in that gallery was never the man I permitted him to paint." Sophia heard the restraint in his voice. Anger might have been easier for him. Silence required more control. "No, Your Grace." He turned toward her. "You said yesterday that the scars followed the structure of my face. How can you be certain without knowing how they were made?" The question did not sound defensive. It sounded precise. Sophia answered in the same manner, because false shadows ignore the pull of living tissue. The painted darkness suggests the eye was damaged more deeply than it is. The line at the mouth implies contraction where your expression moves freely. She paused. "But I cannot distinguish every true contour from invention unless I observe the scars in this light." Augustus glanced toward Lady Leiden and Mr. Vale, then back to Sophia. "You may." She did not move closer. "I need your permission to stand within arm's reach." Something shifted in his face. Perhaps he was unaccustomed to being asked. "You have it." Sophia approached until the differences became clear. The scar began at the left temple, narrowed the eyelid, and crossed the upper cheek in a pale, uneven line. A second mark joined it near the jaw before disappearing beneath the edge of his high cravat. She studied only as long as necessary. "Does the light trouble your eye?" she asked, after a time. "Then I will not keep you facing it longer than needed." His gaze held hers. "Most people ask whether it hurts. That is not information I require. No curiosity. Curiosity is not always entitled to an answer." For the first time, the severity around his mouth eased, not a smile, something smaller and more uncertain. "The injury came at Sevastopol," he said. "Part of a defensive wall collapsed after an explosion. Stone and heated metal struck the left side of my face. I remember very little between the noise and waking beneath canvas." Sophia did not ask what he had seen or whom he had lost. He had given what he chose to give. She stepped back before the light could become a strain. "Thank you." Augustus touched neither scar nor cravat. "Is that enough? For today." She returned to the two paintings. The study must be secured separately from the folio. If Mr. Sedgley disputes the portrait's earlier design, this is the clearest record of what you approved. Augustus turned to Mr. Vale. "Place it in the locked picture cabinet in my study when Miss Redmayne is finished. It is not to leave the house without my written order." "Yes, Your Grace." The connecting door opened before anyone could move. Lady Constance stood upon the threshold. Her eyes found the oil study at once. For a moment, the composure she wore before society failed her. "That belongs to Mr. Sedgley," she said. Augustus stepped between her and the table. "It belongs to the commission. It is merely a preparation. It is the likeness I approved." Constance's gaze moved to Sophia. "You have been remarkably fortunate in what you chose to find." Sophia met the accusation without answering it. Mr. Vale had recorded the folio's opening. Lady Leiden had witnessed every sheet removed. The truth did not need indignation when it had sequence. Augustus looked at his aunt. "You will not touch the study. You cannot mean to preserve that unfinished thing while allowing her to interfere with the completed portrait. She has not yet touched the portrait. And when she does..." Sophia closed the folio and tied its ribbons. "When I do, my first test will be in the lower background, far from the likeness. If the darker surface lifts while the cured layer beneath remains stable, we will know the cruelty was added after the approved painting." Lady Constance's face became very still. Augustus saw it. So did Sophia. He turned toward the portrait, where daylight sharpened the false darkness around his painted eye. "Then that is where we begin." The small square of cleaned paint was no larger than Sophia's thumbnail, yet it changed the room. On the morning of the 30th of April, the East Studio held the same 4 witnesses as before. Lady Leiden sat near the open connecting door. Mr. Vale waited at the writing table with fresh paper. Augustus stood beside the locked picture cabinet, from which the signed oil study had been removed under his supervision, and placed upon a padded stand. The full portrait remained on the central easel. Sophia had chosen a point low in the painted background, far from the Duke's face, where failure would leave no injury to the likeness. She had recorded the spot, the surface condition, and the faint boundary between the older paint and the darker gloss above it. Then, with a narrow swab and a restrained touch, she began the test. Nothing in the room moved except her hand. The first pass lifted only grime. The second dulled the hard shine. On the third, a trace of brown-black resin appeared upon the white cloth, while the cooler blue-grey beneath remained firm. Sophia stopped at once. "There," she said. Augustus came closer, but not close enough to disturb her tools. The cleaned square showed a quieter background under the later darkness. It did not glow. It did not need to. Its importance lay in the fact that it had survived. The upper layer has softened, Sophia said. The older paint has not. Mr. Vale wrote the sentence exactly. Lady Leeden leaned forward, meaning the darker glaze was applied over a surface that had already cured. It was not built into the original passage. Augustus looked from the cleaned square to the heavy shadows surrounding his painted eye. How long after? I cannot name a day from the surface alone. The full portrait appears to have been substantially complete by the end of last year. This upper glaze is newer. It may have been added within the past few months. March, Lady Constance said from the doorway. No one had heard her approach. She entered without invitation, though she stopped when Augustus turned toward her. Mr. Sedgley came to make final adjustments in March. He said the journey from Kent had flattened certain passages. Sophia covered the small dish of spirit and set the swab aside. A journey can disturb varnish. It does not create a different design beneath it. Constance's eyes moved to the cleaned square. You have removed part of the painting. I have removed a test portion of later glaze from the lower background, Sophia said. Nothing more. And from that speck you intend to accuse a respected artist, Augustus answered before Sophia could. I intend to ask him, Mr. Sedgley arrived shortly after noon, dressed in a deep green coat that announced prosperity more confidently than the strain around his eyes supported. He entered the studio with a leather case under one arm and irritation already prepared upon his face. Your Grace, I came as soon as your message reached me. I must say, the suggestion that my work has been tampered with is most extraordinary. No one suggested another hand, Augustus said. Not yet. Sedgley glanced towards Sophia. Recognition sharpened his displeasure. Miss Redmayne. Mr. Sedgley, I understand you have undertaken an examination, at His Grace's request. His gaze dropped to the cleaning tools, with methods suited to old miniatures, no doubt. Sophia did not answer the insult. She pointed to the test square. The dark surface glaze softened before the cured layer beneath it. The difference is visible in daylight. Sedgley bent toward the portrait, though he did not touch it. Final glazes often vary in composition. Any competent painter knows that. Then you acknowledge adding them after the main portrait had dried? I acknowledge finishing my own work. Augustus stood on the opposite side of the easel. Why did the work require finishing after I had approved the study? Mr. Vale opened the picture cabinet and brought out the signed oil study. He placed it upon the stand, then stepped back. For the first time, Sedgley's composure faltered. His eyes fixed upon the date in the corner. That is a private preparation. It is the only likeness I approved, Augustus said. A study is not a contract, Your Grace. A grand portrait demands greater force, greater harmony. The scars required stronger contrast once the figure was enlarged. Sophia looked at the two images. The scars are not stronger in the final portrait. The expression is different. Expression changes during a sitting. His Grace did not sit for the altered mouth. Sedgley turned sharply. You cannot know that. Augustus's voice became colder. I can. The painter's face tightened. Then memory has become selective. You were not an easy subject. That does not explain why the flesh beneath the dark glaze is warmer. Sophia moved nearer the lower test without blocking anyone's view, nor why the approved study shows the left eye without the blackened hollow. The later glaze does not clarify the injury. It changes the viewer's judgment. Sedgley gave a short laugh. You speak as though paint possesses morality. No, Sophia said. Painters do. Silence followed. Lady Constance crossed the room and stood near Sedgley, close enough to suggest alliance without admitting it. Mr. Sedgley was commissioned to create a portrait worthy of this house. The public expects grandeur, not domestic tenderness. Augustus looked at her. The public was invited to laugh. A few foolish women lost their composure. You selected the guests. Constance's mouth became a thin line. Sedgley stepped toward the folio, which had been returned to the East Studio for the confrontation under Mr. Vale's record. If this interrogation is finished, I will take my working papers. They remain my property. Augustus did not move. The studies and records connected with a paid ducal commission remain here until the dispute is resolved. Dispute? Sedgley repeated. You have allowed an obscure restorer to turn technical variation into scandal. Sophia saw the quick calculation behind his anger. He was not merely offended, he was afraid. The unpaid final balance mentioned in his invoice gave him reason to protect the portrait's reputation, but money alone did not explain the force of his denial. Augustus seemed to reach the same conclusion. Were any copies made? He asked. Sedgley blinked. Copies, sketches, engravings, printed reproductions. Of course not. Did any dealer see the finished portrait? No. The answer came too quickly. Sophia watched him gather loose papers into the folio. As he lifted it, a cream-colored calling card slipped from between two sheets and landed face upward near her shoe. A printer's emblem had been pressed into the upper corner. Beneath it appeared the name of a picture and print dealer, followed by an address off Fleet Street. Sophia bent, picked up the card, and read only what was visible before holding it out to Sedgley. You dropped this. His fingers closed around it at once. A tradesman's card. I receive dozens. Then you will have no difficulty explaining why it was kept with the portrait papers, Augustus said. Sedgley pushed the card into his inner pocket. I do not account for every scrap placed in my folio. You denied that any dealer had seen the work, and none has. Yet his card was among the commission studies. Sedgley tied the folio ribbons with unnecessary force. Coincidence is not evidence. No, Sophia said, but denial is not proof. Lady Constance stepped between the painter and further questioning. This has gone far enough. Augustus, your face has already become a source of gossip. Must you now make the method of painting it another? He looked at the portrait. The method became my concern when it changed the man I permitted Sedgley to show. Constance's expression softened into something almost maternal. You misunderstand what was intended. London is shallow. A painted likeness can prepare society for what it lacks the courage to meet in person. By making me worse, by making the truth unmistakable, she turned to Sedgley. Go. His Grace will send for you when he has recovered his sense of proportion. Augustus's gaze stopped him before he reached the door. You will remain available. You will not remove, sell, sketch, or authorize any reproduction connected with this portrait. Sedgley's jaw tightened. There is no reproduction. Then obedience will cost you nothing. The painter left without bowing to Sophia. Constance followed more slowly. At the threshold, she looked back at the portrait, then at the narrow, cleaned square where the quieter color had emerged. Her eyes rested upon Sophia. A black and white print might have spared us all this argument. She said, people understand a face more readily when troublesome subtleties are removed. Then she walked away. The door closed behind her. Sophia looked at Augustus. He was watching the empty doorway, his scarred side turned fully toward the northern light. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. The calling card was gone with Sedgley, but its address remained clear in Sophia's memory. More important was the lie that had preceded it. No copies existed, he had said, yet Lady Constance had just imagined one too easily. On the morning of the 2nd of May, Sophia placed the Duke's chair so that the northern light fell across the left side of his face. Augustus noticed at once. His hand tightened briefly on the carved arm before he sat, and when he turned toward her, he did so with the unscarred side nearest the window. It was not refusal, it was habit. Sophia recognized the difference and said nothing. The East studio had been arranged according to the written schedule. Mr. Vale had prepared after the confrontation with Sedgley. Lady Leiden occupied the adjoining room with the connecting doors open. Her embroidery lay untouched in her lap, though she pretended to be more interested in silk thread than in the silence between Sophia and the Duke. Mr. Vale remained at the writing table long enough to record the start of the sitting, then withdrew to a smaller desk near the doorway, still within sight. The portrait stood covered at the far wall. The signed oil study had been returned to Augustus's locked picture cabinet after each examination and brought out only under his supervision. Today, Sophia needed neither painting. She needed the living expression beneath them both. "Your Grace," she said, "the light must reach the scarred side if I am to judge where the later shadow departs from the true structure." Augustus looked toward the windows. "I understand." Yet he did not move. Sophia opened her sketchbook and waited. She had learned long ago that silence could be a form of pressure, but it could also be a gift. The difference lay in whether one used it to force or to allow. She kept her attention on the blank page. After several moments, Augustus shifted the chair himself. The scarred side of his face turned fully toward the light. "Is that sufficient?" he asked. "Yes." Her pencil moved. She did not draw the scar as a spectacle. She marked the angle of the brow, the slight narrowing of the left eye, the line from temple to cheek, and the way the mouth rested when he was neither speaking nor defending himself. The greater truth lay in the balance of the face. Sedgley's portrait had destroyed that balance by making every shadow serve the injury. Augustus held still for nearly 20 minutes before the muscles around his left eye tightened. The change was small. Most observers would have missed it. Sophia did not. "We will stop," she said. "I can continue." "You can. That does not mean you should." His gaze sharpened. "The sitting has barely begun. The light is causing strain. It passes, then it may pass while you are not required to endure it for my convenience." Lady Leiden's needle paused in the adjoining room. Augustus leaned back slightly, though pride kept his posture straight. "You lose part of your paid hour by stopping now." Sophia closed the sketchbook. "I lose nothing that cannot be taken tomorrow." He studied her, as though kindness were a language he distrusted because it had so often concealed a bargain. "Add the time to your account." "No, Miss Redmayne. I will not charge you more because I noticed discomfort before you chose to name it." Something unreadable passed over his face. Most people would call that attention a service. It is ordinary decency. Nothing in this house has felt ordinary for some time. The words were spoken quietly. Sophia did not answer with reassurance. He had not asked for it. She began cleaning her pencils while Augustus remained in the chair, no longer forced to face the window, yet making no move to turn away. By the third sitting, on the 4th of May, he shifted into the light without being asked. By the 4th, he no longer watched Sophia's expression when she studied the scar. Instead, he watched her hands. They were steady. Even when Lady Constance passed the open doorway twice in 1 hour and allowed her disapproval to linger like perfume, the whispers began outside Norchester House before the week was half over. A note from one of Lady Lydon's acquaintances arrived on the 5th May, phrased as concern and sharpened as gossip. Was it true that Miss Redmayne spent several hours each day in private attendance upon the Duke? Had Lady Lydon considered how such unusual access might be interpreted? Lady Lydon read the note aloud in the adjoining room, then folded it once. My correspondent has never considered anything except how other people's conduct might improve her afternoons. Augustus's mouth almost curved. She is not alone. Sophia kept her attention on the study before her. The room is open. Lady Lydon is present, Mr. Vale records the hours. Facts rarely travel as quickly as implication, Augustus said. Then facts must be made easier to find. That afternoon, he summoned Mr. Vale and dictated a formal household notice. Every sitting would begin after 10 in the morning and conclude before 4. Lady Lydon would remain the named chaperone. The connecting doors would stay open. The household secretary would record the time of entry and departure. No servant would be dismissed from the corridor during the sessions. Copies of the schedule would be kept by the steward, Lady Lydon, and Sophia. You need not turn your work into a public proceeding, Sophia said after Mr. Vale had gone. I am not doing so. Augustus stood near the covered portrait, one hand resting on the cloth without lifting it. I am making it more difficult for anyone to invent secrecy where none exists. That protects my reputation. It also protects your authority. If the examination is challenged, no one may claim you worked without witnesses. Sophia looked at him. His protection was not tender. It was architectural. He built doors, records, and rules where danger might enter. Yet he had listened when she said her word alone would not outweigh rank. That mattered more than softness offered without understanding. On the 7th of May, Sedgley's anger reached Norchester House in the form of a letter demanding payment of the final balance on the original portrait. Mr. Vale brought it to the studio while Sophia was comparing the line of Augustus's mouth with the approved study. Mr. Sedgley says the commission was completed according to the family's instructions. He reported. He requests settlement within 3 days and objects to further interference with his work. Augustus did not look away from Sophia. The balance remains unpaid until the alterations are explained. He also warns that delay may damage his professional standing. His professional standing is not the canvas under examination. Mr. Vale bowed and withdrew. Sophia lowered her pencil. Financial pressure may make him reckless or honest. Fear does not always choose honesty. Augustus's gaze shifted toward the covered portrait. You think he will act before we finish. I think he already has. She told him again about the print dealer's card that had fallen from Sedgley's folio. The address remained clear in her memory. She had not copied or kept the card, and Sedgley had taken it with him. He denied any reproduction existed, she said. Lady Constance spoke of a black and white print before anyone had suggested one to her. That may be coincidence. It may also be preparation. Augustus reached for the bell pull, but before he could summon Mr. Vale, a footman entered carrying a silver salver. An invitation, Your Grace, delivered for the household and for Miss Redmayne through Lady Lydon. The cream card was edged in black and silver. At the top, in elaborate engraved script, appeared Lady Constance's name beside Reginald Sedgley's. Below it was an invitation to a charitable supper celebrating the art of portrait prints. to be held at a fashionable May Fair salon on the 14th May. Augustus read it once, then handed it to Sophia. He denied there were prints. Sophia traced no finger over the card. She only looked at the words. He denied there were copies of your portrait. And now he celebrates the method by which one would be made. From the adjoining room, Lady Leiden rose and came to stand beside them. A charitable supper, she said. How very convenient. Cruelty always dresses more respectably when it carries a subscription list. Sophia turned the card over. A tiny engraved silhouette appeared on the back as a decorative mark. It showed a man's profile, hardly larger than a coin. Even at that size, the shadow around the left eye was too dark. The mouth bent downward in the same false line. Augustus saw it at the same moment. His face became still. The image exists, he said. Sophia looked from the miniature cruelty on the card to the man standing before her, scarred side still open to the daylight. Yes, she said, and someone intends London to see it again. By the 8th May, the small engraved silhouette on Lady Constance's invitation had altered the atmosphere of every sitting. It rested in Mr. Vale's locked desk when not under examination, a harmless cream card carrying an image that should not have existed. Sedgley had denied making any copy. Lady Constance had spoken of a black and white print before anyone had accused her of arranging one. Neither fact proved a conspiracy. Yet together they gave the coming supper the shape of a trap. Sophia refused to let that possibility change the work before her. The east studio remained open to the adjoining room. Lady Leiden sat within sight, turning the pages of a book she had not read for several mornings. Mr. Vale recorded the hour, then withdrew to his desk. Augustus took his usual place before the north-facing windows. The full portrait stood covered against the far wall. The signed oil study remained secured in the picture cabinet and had been brought out only long enough for Sophia to compare the original line of his jaw with the distortion hidden beneath the later glaze. The shadow continues below the edge of your cravat, Sophia said. I cannot determine where Sedgley's invention ends unless I see the full line of the scar. Augustus's hand rose toward the knot at his throat, then stopped. He looked toward the open connecting doors. Lady Leiden? The Dowager Marchioness lifted her eyes from the unread page. I have not gone blind since breakfast, Your Grace. A faint breath of amusement passed through the room. Augustus turned back to Sophia. Will the secretary's presence also satisfy propriety? Yes, but only if you are comfortable proceeding. Comfort has not been a useful measure of my decisions. Then perhaps it should become one. He studied her for a moment, then loosened the high cravat himself. The linen shifted enough to reveal the lower scar where it descended from his jaw toward the left side of his neck. Sophia did not move closer until he gave a slight nod. The mark was paler there, less ridged than the scar across his cheek, but the painted portrait had deepened it into a dark band, suggesting damage far greater than the flesh carried. She opened her sketchbook. The line narrows below the jaw, she said. Sedgley widened it in the portrait. To what purpose? To make the injury appear to control the shape of your neck and shoulder. It does not. Augustus sat very still. You speak as though the portrait were arguing a case. It is. Every likeness argues for a way of seeing its subject. Her pencil traced the angle lightly. A truthful portrait may reveal sorrow, pride, fatigue, vanity, or courage. A dishonest one tells the viewer what conclusion to reach before the face has been understood. And what conclusion did Sedgley choose for me? Sophia looked from the sketch to the man. That war left nothing in you except threat. He did not react at once. Outside the tall windows, carriage wheels passed along the street. Somewhere below, a door closed. The ordinary sounds made the silence between them feel more private, though they were not alone. Augustus turned his head slightly, allowing the light to reach the scar more fully. There was a mirror in the dressing room at Rookwood Abbey, he said. My valet covered it before I returned from the Crimea. He thought he was sparing me. Sophia lowered pencil but did not interrupt. I removed the cloth the first night. Then I put it back before morning. His mouth tightened without becoming the false sneer in the portrait. For months, I looked only when duty required it. Shaving, dressing, receiving physicians. Each glance became a negotiation over whether the face belonged to me or to the people who stared at it. Lady Lydon's book remained open, but no page turned. Sophia asked, "Was that why you agreed to the grand portrait?" My aunt said a public likeness would prove I did not care. Did it? No. The answer came without hesitation. It proved I was willing to let another person decide what indifference should look like. Sophia resumed the sketch, not because the confession had ended, but because continuing the work allowed him to speak without being watched too directly. Indifference is not freedom, she said. It is only another way of arranging one's life around the wound. He looked at her. You have considered this before. Not scars such as yours. She paused. But I know what it means to let another person's judgment become the frame around one's life. He did not ask for an explanation she had not offered. That restraint touched her more than sympathy would have. What should the restored portrait show? He asked. Sophia considered the oil study, the living face, and the cruel canvas waiting beneath its cloth. Control, she said. Not the control of a man pretending nothing happened, the control of a man who decides what the injury is permitted to mean. And the scars, they remain, without softening, without shame. His gaze held hers. The left eye narrowed slightly beneath the strain of the light, but he did not turn away. You make it sound simple. It is not simple. It is only clear. The sitting continued for another quarter-hour. When Sophia finally stepped back, Augustus retied his cravat with measured movements. She closed her sketchbook, but he remained seated. I find myself waiting for these mornings, he said. The admission was so quiet that even Lady Lydon did not pretend to turn a page. Sophia felt her breath pause. Rank stood between them, even in honesty. A duke could make a request sound like permission when it was truly an expectation. Augustus seemed to understand that danger at the same instant. That was not an instruction, he added, nor a claim upon your time beyond the commission. I know. Do you? I know because you stopped yourself. Something changed in his expression, not relief. Recognition again, deeper than before. He rose and moved away from the chair, giving distance where he could easily have taken closeness. Then I will say only that your presence has made this room less difficult to enter. Sophia gathered her pencils, and your willingness to enter it has made the work possible. On the 12th May, the invitation returned to the studio under Mr. Vale's supervision. The small silhouette on its reverse had been enlarged beneath a lens. The blackened left eye and bent mouth matched the cruel portrait too precisely to be decorative coincidence. Augustus stood beside the table, his scarred side turned toward the window by choice now. I can cancel the supper, he said. Constance used my name to arrange it. One order will close the doors. Sophia looked at the engraved image. The doors may close. The prince will not cease to exist. You believe there are more. I believe Sedgley lied when he said there were none. I believe Lady Constance knows more than she has admitted. If we do not attend, they will control whatever is shown and whatever is said. Lady Leiden folded her hands over the head of her cane. A trap is less comfortable when the intended victim arrives with witnesses. Augustus's attention remained on Sophia. You would willingly enter a room prepared by people who have already used my face once, only if you do not hide me when they try to use it again. His expression became grave. I would not. Sophia heard certainty in the promise, but also the confidence of a man who had not yet learned how protection could become another form of concealment. She chose not to challenge a failure that had not happened, not yet. Then we should attend, she said. Augustus turned the invitation face down, covering the miniature distortion with his hand. Very well, we will see what they intend London to carry away. The first proof was placed before Sophia at the same moment the laughter began. It was the 14th of May, and the Mayfair print salon had been dressed to resemble benevolence. White lilac stood in silver bowls. Subscription cards for a charitable fund lay beside each plate. Lady Constance had arranged the supper beneath the language of patronage and public good, while Reginald Sedgeley moved among the guests with the satisfied gravity of a man expecting admiration. Sophia sat between Lady Leiden and the wife of a royal academician. Augustus occupied the opposite side of the long table, his scarred profile turned partly toward her. He had entered the room without attempting to shield that side of his face, though more than one guest had looked too quickly and then pretended interest in the candles. Dinner passed beneath polished conversation. No portrait was mentioned, no print was displayed. Sedgeley spoke of artistic duty. Constance praised the moral value of making art available beyond ancestral houses. By the time the final course was cleared, several guests had relaxed enough to believe the danger had been imagined. Then the salon doors opened. 4 servants entered, carrying shallow portfolios bound in black ribbon. One proof was placed before every guest. The paper was heavy and faintly damp from recent pressing. Sophia saw the image before she saw the words. Augustus had been reproduced in black and grey, but the cruelty had deepened in translation. The darkness around his left eye had become almost cavernous. The scar across his cheek appeared jagged and severe. The false line at his mouth had sharpened into open contempt. Without the colour and scale of the original canvas, there was no room left for ambiguity. The print did not suggest a wounded man. It announced a dangerous one. A woman near the head of the table gave a startled laugh. Another guest whispered, "Good heavens," with the breathless pleasure of someone who had been granted permission to stare. A gentleman turned the sheet sideways as though the angle might make the face less disturbing. It did not. Sophia heard the first ripple of amusement travel along the table. Then she read the line beneath the image. After the likeness corrected under the direction of Miss Sophia Redmayne. The room seemed to narrow around those words. Lady Leiden's hand closed over the edge of the table. Across from them, Augustus lowered his gaze to his own proof. His expression did not change at once. That stillness was more alarming than anger. "How remarkable," said the academician's wife beside Sophia. "I had understood you were restoring the Duke's portrait, Miss Redmayne. I did not realize your improvements had already been engraved." "They have not," Sophia said. Her voice was quiet, but the nearest conversations ceased. She lifted the proof without touching the printed surface. At the lower margin, a small blind stamp marked the paper. Beside it appeared a plate-state number in fine type. She fixed both details in memory. They were not decorative. They belonged to a sequence. Across the table, one young lord gave a short, uncomfortable laugh. Perhaps improvement is not the word. His companion murmured something about artistic honesty. Sophia looked towards Sedgley. He stood near the mantel, with one hand resting on the back of Constance's chair. "Who authorized the use of my name?" she asked. Sedgley spread his hands with practiced regret. The publisher prepared the wording. These matters are often handled by dealers. A dealer does not invent the name of a woman who has never seen the plate. Then there has been an unfortunate enthusiasm. An enthusiasm placed beneath every copy in this room. Constance leaned back in her chair. "Surely you are not offended by professional notice, Miss Redmayne. Women in your position usually spend years wishing their names would travel so far." The insult was mild enough to pass for advice. Several guests looked down. Others watched more closely. Sophia placed the proof flat before her. "My position is not the question. My authority is. I did not direct this likeness. I did not approve it. I did not permit my name to be printed beneath it." "But you did undertake the correction of His Grace's portrait," Constance said. "Your own words have been repeated, nothing more. My correction has not begun." That answer disturbed the room more than protest would have. It left the image without a respectable origin. Sedgley stepped forward. "The plate was prepared from my completed work. If the publisher assumed Miss Redmayne's examination had endorsed it, that is regrettable, but hardly malicious." Augustus lifted his proof. "You told me no reproduction existed." Sedgley hesitated. "No authorized edition had been released." "That was not what I asked." "Your Grace, a trial plate is common practice." "Then why was it denied?" No one laughed now. Augustus turned the sheet toward the light. The false shadow swallowed the painted eye. His thumb rested beneath Sophia's printed name, not over it. "How many copies?" he asked. Sedgley glanced toward Constance. The movement was brief, but too many people saw it. "A limited subscription," he said, "for tonight's charitable purpose." "How many?" 24 proofs. A lady near the doors lowered hers toward her lap. Augustus looked along the table. "No copy is to leave this room." The authority in his voice silenced even the servants. "Collect them." Sedgley stiffened. "Your Grace, several have already been promised." "Then the promises are withdrawn." You cannot suppress a legitimate artistic edition after accepting the original commission. I can prevent the sale of my likeness when it is falsely attributed to another artist. Augustus stood. Every guest followed, a heartbeat later, chairs shifting across the carpet. He took the proof from the place before him and crossed to Sophia. The salon had been arranged so that anyone wishing to leave discreetly could pass through a small side door near the musician's alcove. Augustus did not look toward it. He held out his hand. "Miss Redmayne." Sophia rose without taking it. She did not need to be led like someone unable to stand beneath accusation. Augustus understood. His hand lowered, but he remained beside her. "We will leave through the main room," he said. Constance's composure sharpened. "Must you make a spectacle of this?" Augustus looked at the printed face on the table. "That decision was made before I arrived." He offered his arm to Lady Leiden first. The Dowager Marchioness accepted it, then placed Sophia on her other side. Together, they crossed the salon, beneath the gaze of every guest. Augustus walked beside Sophia, not before her. When one gentleman attempted to conceal a proof inside his portfolio, the Duke stopped. "Leave it." The man obeyed. At the entrance to the main drawing room, Sophia saw two departing ladies already descending the stairs. Each carried a black ribboned portfolio. A footman had been too late to stop them. Another guest had folded a proof inside his evening coat before the order was given. The image had already escaped the room. Augustus saw the same thing. His jaw tightened. Sedgley followed them into the drawing room. "This can be explained privately." Sophia turned. "My name was printed publicly. An error in attribution does not require a social war. Then correct it before the same people who read it." Sedgley looked away. Constance appeared behind him, calm once more. "You are allowing wounded pride to destroy an opportunity. London now knows Miss Redmayne is associated with a ducal portrait. She should be grateful." "Grateful for being accused of cruelty?" Lady Leiden asked. "Grateful for being noticed," Constance replied. Sophia met her gaze. "There are forms of notice no honourable person should accept." Augustus looked from Sophia to the guests gathering at the salon doors. He had promised not to hide her. She waited to see whether he understood that standing beside her was not the same as speaking over her. For one moment, she believed he did. Then he stepped into the center of the room and raised the disputed proof where everyone could see it. "Miss Redmayne bears no responsibility for this image," he said. Relief moved through Sophia too quickly. It vanished with his next words. "Every artistic decision connected with my portrait was made under my authority. She merely followed my instructions." The words settled over the drawing room with the weight of a locked door. Sophia did not move. Around her, the guests shifted from accusation to relief with almost indecent speed. If the Duke claimed every decision as his own, then Miss Redmayne might be forgiven. She could be recast as an obedient woman who had lacked both authority and judgment. The scandal had not been removed. It had merely been made easier for society to understand. Lady Leiden looked at Augustus with open disappointment. Constance's expression softened into satisfaction. Sedgley lowered his eyes, concealing whatever triumph might have appeared there. Sophia turned toward Augustus. "Merely followed your instructions?" He heard the injury in the question. His gaze remained steady, but the certainty with which he had addressed the room began to fracture. "I meant to remove your name from the accusation. You removed it from the work. This is not the place. My name was placed beneath that print in this place." Several guests pretended not to listen. None left. Augustus glanced toward them, then offered his arm to Lady Leiden. "We are returning to Norchester House. This will be settled there." Sophia wanted to refuse even that direction, yet the proof he held belonged to the evidence they would need, and a confrontation before amused strangers would only feed the same appetite that had produced the laughter. She walked beside Lady Leiden through the main entrance. Augustus followed. He did not take the side passage, but the choice no longer felt like courage. Outside, the Mayfair night was mild. Carriages waited beneath the lamps, their crests and polished doors catching the light. Lady Leiden and Sophia entered the Dowager Marchioness's carriage. Augustus rode behind them in his own, carrying the disputed proof inside a flat portfolio. No one spoke during the short journey. At Norchester House, Mr. Vale received the print in the ducal study and recorded its custody before placing it inside a locked drawer. Sophia remained standing near the desk. Lady Leiden took the chair beside the hearth, though no fire had been lit. Augustus dismissed the footman and closed the door only after Lady Leiden was clearly present. "What I said was intended to protect you," he began. Sophia removed her gloves, one finger at a time. "From what?" "From being called ambitious, dishonest, or cruel. By declaring that I possessed no artistic judgment of my own, by making it clear that no decision was yours." "Exactly," He stopped. You believe I should have said nothing? I believe you should have said the truth. I was appointed to examine and restore the portrait. I had not begun the restoration. I did not authorize the print. My name was used without my consent, and every person in that room would still have asked why an unmarried woman of no great family had been granted such authority over a duke's likeness. Then they should have heard the answer, which is that I was qualified. The simplicity of it silenced him. Sophia placed her gloves upon the desk. You cleared me of wickedness by making me incapable. They may now believe I did not wound you because I was too insignificant to act without command. That was not my intention. Intent does not restore what your words removed. Augustus looked toward the locked drawer containing the proof. London can destroy a woman's reputation in one evening, and you thought the safest solution was to erase the part of mine I had earned. I thought authority would draw the blame toward me. It did. It also drew the work toward you. Lady Leiden spoke at last. Your Grace, Miss Redmayne, does not require society to believe she is harmless. She requires it to know she is honorable and competent. Those are not the same defense. Augustus paced once toward the window, then stopped with his scarred side reflected faintly in the glass. The print is already outside that salon. I cannot call back every copy tonight. No, Sophia said. But you can refrain from repeating the method used against you. He turned. What method? Concealment in the name of protection. The blow reached him. She saw it in the sudden stillness of his shoulders. My aunt hid the truth of your face beneath another person's intention. You have hidden the truth of my work beneath yours. That comparison is unjust, is it? I did not humiliate you. You made me invisible before the same people who had just used my name. Augustus's expression hardened, not with anger at her, but with resistance to a truth he did not yet know how to bear. Until the matter is resolved, you will not return to the studio. Sophia stared at him. You are suspending the commission. Temporarily, the household will deny all inquiries concerning your involvement. Your name will be removed from the restoration notice until the scandal has passed. Lady Leiden rose. You have heard nothing, she said. I have heard every word. Augustus's voice remained controlled. I will not allow her to become a target while Sedgley and my aunt control the gossip. Sophia felt the final thread of trust draw tight. You will not allow me. He looked at her. This is not punishment. No. Punishment would at least admit that you believe I did something wrong. This is protection, which means you need not ask what I choose. He crossed to the desk and opened a smaller drawer. The commission fee will be paid in full. In addition, I can arrange an income sufficient to free you from dependence upon uncertain patrons. Sophia's hand became cold. He believed money could place walls around harm. Perhaps that was how dukes survived. Perhaps it was also how they failed to see the people beyond those walls. I do not want an income purchased with my silence. It is not payment for silence. Then what is it payment for? He had no answer that did not sound like control. Sophia looked toward Mr. Vale's writing table in the adjoining office. I will withdraw from the commission in writing tomorrow morning. The unused portion of my retainer will be returned through your household accountant. That is unnecessary. It is necessary to me, Sophia. It was the first time he had spoken her given name. The sound of it nearly weakened her resolve because it carried no title, no command, and too much feeling. She did not let it. You cannot call me back into visibility only when we are alone. His breath changed. I am trying to keep you safe. Then learn the difference between safety and disappearance. On the morning of the 15th of May, Sophia returned to Norchester House with Lady Leiden. She did not enter the East Studio. At the household office, she placed the unused balance of the retainer before the accountant and received a signed acknowledgement. Her written withdrawal named no accusation. It stated only that the terms under which she had accepted professional responsibility no longer existed. Mr. Vale read it once, then looked at her with regret. His Grace may reconsider. He may. I have already done so. Augustus met them in the entrance hall before they departed. He had not slept. The scar near his left eye appeared tighter, though his posture remained exact. The portrait will remain untouched, he said. No one enters the studio. That is wise. You could return when the prints are recovered. My return cannot depend upon society forgetting what happened. Then, what would it depend upon? Sophia held his gaze. Whether you are willing to let the truth remain visible when it costs you control. She walked through the front door beside Lady Leiden. No servant hurried her into a side passage. No one could claim she had been dismissed in secret, though London would invent its own version before noon. By evening, 2 print shops displayed the cruel mezzotint in their windows. Constance had arranged the placement through intermediaries, careful enough to leave no order bearing her hand. Augustus bought every visible copy and sent servants to inquire after more. Yet as he stood beneath the awning of the second shop, holding the black-ribboned portfolio against his side, he saw a gentleman across the street unfold another proof for 2 companions. The image had already passed beyond his reach. For the first time, Augustus understood that possession was not the same as control, and concealment was not the same as protection. On the morning of the 16th of May, Augustus's solicitor arrived at Leiden House carrying the mezzotint inside a locked portfolio. Mr. Harcourt was a narrow, careful man whose silver spectacles appeared designed to distrust every document placed beneath them. He produced a receipt signed by Mr. Vale, then laid the proof upon the long table in Lady Leiden's picture room. His Grace has instructed me to place this in your hands for examination, Miss Redmayne, he said. It remains in my custody throughout. Sophia looked at the printed face and felt the same cold anger she had known at the supper. Beneath it, her name still claimed responsibility for a cruelty she had opposed. That is as it should be. She did not touch the sheet until Mr. Harcourt supplied clean paper guards for its edges. Lady Leiden opened a cabinet containing catalogues from London print dealers, exhibition lists, and auction records accumulated over 3 decades of patronage. The blind stamp in the lower margin was small enough to escape an ordinary glance. Under magnification, it showed a winged lamp above 3 letters. The plate-state number beside it read 2. Sophia remembered the cream calling card that had fallen from Sedgley's folio. The emblem had been the same. The address was off Fleet Street, she said. Number 18, Bell Court. The dealer's name was Pritchard. Lady Leiden found the matching catalogue after several minutes. The winged lamp belonged to Pritchard & Lowe, printsellers and copperplate printers. Mr. Harcourt recorded the identification. You are certain of the address? I returned the card to Mr. Sedgley. I did not copy it, but I saw it clearly. Memory alone will not prove that it came from his folio. No, it tells us where to ask the next question. Mr. Harcourt studied her. His Grace could summon the printer. His Grace's title might produce obedience before it produces truth. Sophia looked again at the false attribution. Lady Leiden and I will call during business hours. You may follow after the plate and records are identified. That is an unusual arrangement. Lady Leiden closed the catalogue. So was placing a gentlewoman's name beneath a libellous print. We shall endure novelty. Belcourt lay beyond the polished calm of Mayfair, where the streets narrowed, and the air carried ink, damp paper, and coal smoke. Sophia and Lady Leiden arrived shortly before noon in the Dowager Marchioness's carriage. A footman waited outside while they entered the ground-floor workshop. Racks of drying prints lined one wall. Copperplates stood upright in wooden slots, each wrapped in paper and marked with chalk. Behind a broad counter, a middle-aged printer with blackened fingertips looked up from an account book. "Mr. Pritchard?" Lady Leiden asked. "Yes, my lady." His expression changed when Sophia placed the salon proof upon the counter without releasing it. "You recognize this?" Pritchard's gaze moved immediately to the false caption. "I printed it." "Did Miss Redmayne authorize the use of her name?" Lady Leiden asked. "I don't know Miss Redmayne." "You do now," Sophia said. The printer removed his spectacles and wiped them with a stained cloth. Mr. Sedgley supplied the design. The wording came later. "How much later?" Sophia asked. Pritchard hesitated. After the first proofs were pulled. "There was an earlier state. There usually is." "Without my name?" His silence answered before his voice did. "Yes." Lady Leiden rested both hands upon her cane. "You will show it to us." "I cannot hand over a customer's work." "No one has asked you to surrender it," Sophia said, "only to show whether the plate was altered after the cruel image already existed." Pritchard looked toward the workshop door. "You have brought no officer." "There is no officer," Sophia replied. "This is a matter of attribution, patronage, and professional fraud. A solicitor will attend if you agree to preserve the evidence." The word preserve changed him. Fear of the Duke might have made him defensive. Fear of being blamed for destroying proof made him practical. He crossed to a locked cabinet, withdrew a flat wrapper, and returned with a single mezzotint. The image was the same. The blackened eye, the exaggerated scar, and the false mouth were already present. Beneath it appeared Sedgley's name and the printer's line. Sophia's name did not. "First state," Pritchard said. "One proof retained for the workshop record." Sophia compared the two sheets without placing them together. Who ordered the second caption? Lady Constance approved it. Did she write the words? She spoke them. Mr. Sedgley agreed. Lady Leiden's gaze hardened. "And you engraved them without Miss Redmayne's authority." Mr. Sedgley said the restoration was under ducal commission. Lady Constance used the Duke's household name. "I believed they had the right." "You believed rank was permission," Sophia said. Pritchard flushed. "I believed I would lose the work if I refused." "How many second state proofs?" 24 for the supper. 6 more for shop display and subscription. Some have been sold. And the first state, only 3. 1 went to Mr. Sedgley. 1 was spoiled during printing. This is the workshop proof. Sophia resisted the urge to reach for it. The unique tracked proof remained in Pritchard's possession until a lawful transfer could be witnessed. "Where is the copperplate?" she asked. He pointed toward the rear safe. "Locked. It must remain there. No new impressions, no caption altered, no plate cleaned or scored." "On whose authority?" "Your own. If you wish to prove you did not invent the false attribution." The printer looked between her and Lady Leiden. "And if Sedgley demands it?" "Tell him the plate cannot leave while ownership and authorization are disputed," Sophia said. "Mr. Harcourt will come this afternoon. You will transfer nothing until he witnesses the condition of the plate and gives you a receipt." Pritchard replaced the first state proof in its wrapper. "I'll seal the safe in your presence." He pressed wax across a paper strip joining the safe door to its frame. Lady Leiden and Sophia signed the edge as witnesses. No one pretended the seal made the contents impossible to reach. It made interference visible. Before leaving, Sophia wrote a factual account of what they had seen. She named the blind stamp, the two plate states, the absence and later addition of her name, Pritchard's statement, and the sealed safe. She did not accuse Constance beyond what the printer had personally said. The document went directly to Mr. Harcourt when he arrived at Belcourt less than an hour later. By evening, the first state proof had been delivered to his office under Pritchard's signed receipt. The second state proof from the supper had also passed from the ducal study into the solicitor's custody for comparison. The copperplate remained sealed in the workshop safe until a witness transfer could be arranged. At Norchester House, Augustus stood beside Mr. Harcourt's desk while the two proofs were placed before him. The first showed the cruel image without Sophia's name. The second showed the same image with her name engraved beneath it. Nothing in the face had changed between states, only the target had. "She found this without using my name?" Augustus asked. Lady Leiden's rank opened the door, Mr. Harcourt said. Miss Redmayne's knowledge obtained the truth. Augustus looked at the false caption for a long time. Sophia had continued to protect the integrity of the evidence after he had stripped her authority from the room. She had not sold the story to a scandal sheet. She had not seized the plate. She had not asked him to rescue her. She had followed the image to its source and left every object where its history could be proved. Sedgley prepared the cruelty first, Augustus said. Then Constance added Sophia to it. Mr. Harcourt adjusted his spectacles. "That is what the sequence indicates." Augustus touched neither proof. His scarred reflection hovered faintly in the glass above the desk. "Arrange a meeting at Sedgley's studio," he said, "and send word to Leiden House that Miss Redmayne's evidence has been received exactly as she delivered it." He paused. No instruction, no request that she return. Mr. Harcourt inclined his head. Augustus looked once more at the two states. He had believed power meant acting before harm could spread. Sophia had shown him another kind. It meant knowing when not to take the truth out of the hands that had earned it. On the 22nd May, Augustus entered Reginald Sedgley's Bloomsbury studio carrying no threat that needed to be spoken aloud. Mr. Harcourt walked beside him with the two mezzotint proofs secured in a flat leather case. Mr. Vale followed with the signed oil study wrapped in clean cloth and enclosed in a narrow wooden box. The full portrait remained locked in the East Studio at Norchester House, untouched since Sophia's withdrawal. Its condition had been recorded. Its cleaned test square had been witnessed. Nothing about it would be moved, merely to make confrontation convenient. Sedgley stood near a bank of tall windows, his green coat replaced by a sober brown one that did not conceal the strain in his face. He had cleared the central work table before their arrival. No brushes lay open. No unfinished canvas waited upon an easel. The emptiness made the room feel less like a studio than a place from which evidence had already begun to disappear. "Your Grace," he said, bowing, "I had expected your solicitor. I did not expect you." "You painted my face," Augustus replied. "You may answer to it directly." Mr. Harcourt placed the leather case on the table and opened it. The first state proof lay on the left, showing the cruel likeness without Sophia's name. The second lay on the right, identical except for the false attribution engraved beneath the image. Mr. Vale opened the wooden box and set the signed oil study between them. The three images formed a sequence no eloquence could soften. Sedgley looked at the oil study first. Then his gaze moved to the prints. You have assembled a dramatic display. You prefer drama, Augustus said. I thought it appropriate. Sedgley's mouth tightened. I have already explained that the study was preliminary, and Miss Redmayne has already established that the darker glaze lies above a cured layer. A small cleaning test does not make her the final authority on my method. Mr. Harcourt removed Sophia's recorded observations and the statements witnessed by Lady Leiden and Mr. Vale. It establishes that the surface was altered after the underlying work had dried, the date of the study, the commission accounts, and your March visit to Norchester House establish opportunity. Sedgley looked toward the windows. Opportunity is not misconduct. Augustus rested one hand on the table beside the oil study. Why did you change the expression? I strengthened it. Why? Because the original lacked consequence. It lacked cruelty. It lacked what society would remember. The answer escaped before caution could reclaim it. Sedgley closed his eyes briefly, then continued with the weary arrogance of a man who preferred to defend ambition rather than admit fear. A great portrait must command attention. Your scars were already the subject of whispers. A softened military likeness would have been forgotten among 100 respectable canvases. I gave the workforce. You gave it notoriety. Notoriety fills galleries and pays debts, Augustus asked. Sedgley's face changed. Mr. Harcourt placed the unpaid invoice beside the proofs. Your creditors have made 3 formal demands since February. My finances are not part of this commission. They became part of it when you prepared an unauthorized edition for sale, Augustus said. He touched neither print. Did you order the first state? Sedgley looked at the image without Sophia's name. Yes. Did you supply the cruel likeness to the printer? Yes. Did you deny its existence when I asked you? A pause. Yes. Did you permit the second caption? Sedgley's gaze shifted to Mr. Harcourt, then to Mr. Vale. There would be no private bargain here. Lady Constance proposed the wording. That was not my question. I permitted it. Why? She assured me House Duncombe would continue its patronage. She said Miss Redmayne would be removed once the attribution caused sufficient embarrassment. The room became very quiet. Augustus felt anger rise, but it did not scatter his judgment. Sophia had gathered the evidence without seizing what did not belong to her. She had given him a model of control that did not depend upon silence. He would not waste it now. You will acknowledge each of those facts at a public viewing, he said. Sedgley stared at him. You intend to exhibit my own work against me. I intend to exhibit the sequence you created. That would destroy me. No, your choices have done that work. Public truth will only identify the author. Sedgley's composure broke at last. If I refuse, Mr. Harcourt answered, the unpaid balance will remain cancelled. His Grace will circulate a factual notice to every household that has received your card under ducal recommendation. The printer's statement and both plate states will be available to any patron whose likeness you propose to reproduce. Augustus added, you may acknowledge what you did or allow the evidence to speak while you hide from it. I will not offer a third path. Sedgley looked again at the oil study, where the scars remained visible without becoming monstrous. His defeat came not as collapse, but as calculation. I will speak to my own actions, he said. I will not accept sole blame for Lady Constance's design. You will not be asked to accept what is not yours, only what is. When Augustus returned to Norchester House, he found Constance in the morning room giving instructions to the housekeeper about a musicale she had scheduled for June. Invitations lay in neat stacks beside her. She did not rise when he entered. "You have been to Bloomsbury," she said. "Sedgley sent word before you arrived. Then he has shown more speed than loyalty." Constance dismissed the housekeeper with a glance. When the door closed, she folded her hands. "You are behaving as though I wished to harm you. You wished to control what everyone believed about me, because you had stopped controlling it yourself. By turning my scars into spectacle, by ensuring shallow, women revealed themselves before they came near you." Her voice softened. "Do you think I did not see how they looked at you after the Crimea? Pity first, curiosity second, calculation always. The portrait made their cowardice visible. It also made their laughter possible. Better laughter in a gallery than betrayal in a marriage." Augustus looked at her and finally understood the architecture of her devotion. Constance did not believe love could survive truth. She believed dependence was safer because dependence could be managed. A duchess would have displaced her. Sophia's refusal to fear him had threatened the arrangement more completely than any social rival. "You added Sophia's name to the print because she proved you wrong," he said. "I added nothing. I approved a caption. A distinction without honor." Constance rose. "She is ambitious. Every woman who enters a duke's life is ambitious." She left my money on a household desk and walked out, through the front door. A more effective performance than tears. Augustus felt the last habit of deference to family history fall away. "From this hour, you will issue no invitation in the name of House Duncombe. You will approve no commission, subscription, charitable appeal, or household entertainment. The steward and housekeeper will take instruction from me alone." Her face whitened. "You cannot remove me from the house I have governed for 20 years. I have removed your authority. What follows will depend upon your conduct before the public viewing. And if I refuse to attend, then your absence will not prevent the truth." He left her standing beside the untouched invitations. 2 days later, during proper morning call hours, Augustus was shown into the drawing room at Leyden House. Lady Leyden sat near the window. Sophia stood beside a table covered with miniature frames awaiting repair. She wore no expression of welcome, but neither did she retreat. Augustus bowed first to Lady Leyden, then to Sophia. "I have not come to ask you to return." Sophia's hands remained still. "Why have you come?" "To name what I did without disguising it as protection." He had prepared no speech. Prepared words had begun too many wrongs. "At the salon, I told society you merely obeyed me. I believed I was drawing blame away from you. In truth, I took your professional judgment and replaced it with my authority. When you objected, I suspended your work, removed your name, and offered money instead of choice." Lady Leyden watched him without mercy. Sophia's gaze did not soften. Augustus continued. "You told me I had made you invisible. You were right." The admission left him more exposed than any scar sitting had done. Sedgley has confessed to the later glaze, the first print, and his consent to the false caption. Constance has lost authority over the household's invitations and patronage. There will be a public viewing. Your name will be corrected before the same class of people who heard it misused. Sophia asked, "Will the truth be shown or only announced?" "Shown. The oil, study, yes. Both print states, yes. The portrait itself." He hesitated only because the answer mattered. "If you are willing to restore it, and if Lady Constance objects, her objection will not remove evidence. Sophia looked toward the miniature frames, then back at him. Private apology cannot come before public truth. I understand. Do you? I am beginning to. For the first time, something like sorrow entered her expression. Then there is one condition beyond all the others. Augustus waited. If I return, you will not see the restored portrait before society does. His breath slowed. She was asking him to surrender the image he had tried to control since returning from war. She was also asking him to trust her where he had failed to trust himself. You would cover it from me. I would ask you not to look until the public viewing, and I would have no power to alter what you reveal. That is the point. Silence held between them. Then Augustus bowed his head. Agreed. Sophia did not forgive him. She did not promise affection. She only said, "Then bring me a new commission written in my terms." On the 27th May, Sophia returned to Norchester House, carrying a commission written in her own hand. She did not bring hope with her. Hope could soften conditions that had been learned through injury. She brought clarity instead. Lady Leiden entered beside her, and Mr. Harcourt waited in the East Studio with Mr. Vale at the writing table. Augustus stood near the covered portrait. He had not entered the room since ordering it locked after Sophia's departure, and the cloth had remained undisturbed. The signed oil study was still secured in the picture cabinet. The first state and second state mezzotint proofs remained in Mr. Harcourt's custody. The copperplate had been transferred from Pritchard's sealed workshop, safe to the solicitor under the witnessed receipt, and had not been altered. Every object remained where its history could be proved. Sophia placed the new commission upon the table. You ask for my terms, Your Grace. Augustus looked at the document but did not reach for it. Read them. She did. Her voice remained even. I am to be named as the sole restorer of the portrait. No description of my work will state or imply that I merely followed another person's artistic direction. The genuine scars will not be softened, concealed, or removed. The signed oil study and both states of the mezzotint will be displayed at the final viewing. The copperplate will remain in the solicitor's custody until that event. Lady Constance's objection will not remove any evidence. I may stop the restoration or cancel the viewing if the work is interfered with. You will not see the restored portrait before the public does. Mr. Harcourt's spectacles caught the window light as he reviewed the final page. Augustus asked, "Is that all?" Sophia met his gaze. No, the room remains open during every sitting. Lady Leiden remains present. Mr. Vale records each session. No one enters without permission. Not even you. A faint movement touched Lady Leiden's mouth. Augustus did not smile. Agreed. You have not read the document. You have. That is not sufficient. He crossed to the table and read every line. Sophia watched him pause at the condition forbidding him to preview the restored likeness. His face gave away nothing. He took up the pen and signed without striking through a word. Then he handed it to Mr. Harcourt for witnessing. The commission stands as written. Sophia felt no sudden relief. Trust did not return because a man signed what he should never have taken from her. It returned through repetition, through the next right choice after the first. She looked toward the portrait. Then we begin. The work occupied the mornings of 27 through 31 May. Sophia started in the lower background, extending the cleaning test only after confirming that the cured oil beneath remained stable. The later glaze softened gradually under her hand. She worked in small passages, never allowing impatience to become damage. Augustus did not stand over her. He remained in the room only when she needed the living face for comparison. At all other times, he sat with Lady Lydon in the adjoining chamber, or attended to correspondence at Mr. Vale's desk. He asked before approaching the canvas. He did not lift the cloth when Sophia covered a completed area. On the second day, the false darkness around the left eye began to recede. A quieter structure emerged beneath it. The scar remained. The hollow did not. On the third day, Sophia loosened the brown-black glaze that had dragged the painted mouth into a sneer. Underneath was the straight, controlled line she had seen in the oil study and in Augustus himself. Lady Lydon watched from the open doorway. "There he is," she said softly. Augustus remained beyond the angle from which the revealed face could be seen. "Do not tell me." "I wasn't speaking to you," Lady Lydon replied. Sophia continued working. The restored expression was not gentle. It did not flatter him into ease. Fatigue remained around the eyes. Reserve remained in the mouth. The scars crossed the face without apology. What disappeared was the command to fear him. On the 30th of May, Augustus sat for the final comparison. He took his place before the northern windows and turned the scarred side fully toward the light before Sophia asked. The movement was deliberate. She noticed the brief tightening around his left eye. "We can shorten the sitting." "No," he paused. "I mean, I would prefer to continue, but the choice is yours." Sophia opened her sketchbook. 10 minutes. Agreed. She compared the line of the jaw, the angle of the brow, and the fall of light across the scar near his temple. Augustus held still. He did not ask what the portrait looked like. That silence cost him more than questions would have. When Sophia stepped closer to check the transition between cheek and neck, he waited for her permission before loosening his cravat. Lady Lydon remained within sight. Mr. Vale recorded the time. Nothing about the moment was improper, yet the restraint within it felt more intimate than privacy. Sophia finished the final notation and closed the sketchbook. "You may turn away from the light." Augustus did not. Not yet. She looked at him. "Does it hurt? Less than it did?" "That was not my question." His gaze met hers. "Yes, then turn." This time he obeyed without resistance. The small act reached her more deeply than endurance would have. He had spent years proving he could bear discomfort. Now he was learning that trust might also mean allowing another person to end it. A footman entered with Lady Lydon's permission and presented a sealed note addressed to Sophia. The handwriting on the outside belonged to Lady Constance. Sophia did not open it alone. She passed it first to Lady Lydon, who broke the seal and read the contents aloud. Constance offered Sophia a permanent income, introductions to wealthy patrons, and a house in Bath if she abandoned the restoration and left London before the final viewing. The language never named bribery. It called the offer security. It called departure wisdom. It called silence compassion. Lady Lydon lowered the page. "She has learned nothing." Sophia folded the letter and handed it to Mr. Harcourt. "Place it with the other correspondence." Augustus's face had become cold. "You do not need to answer her." Sophia looked at him. "That is for me to decide." He stopped. The old instinct to command had risen and been caught before it became action. "What do you wish to do?" he asked. The question was simple. It mattered because he had finally asked it in front of witnesses, where obedience could not masquerade as choice. "I will refuse in writing," Sophia said. "Lady Lydon will witness it. Mr. Harcourt may preserve both letters. Lady Constance will not be permitted to claim I accepted anything from her." "And the viewing?" Augustus asked. "It proceeds." He nodded. "No argument. No order that she remain away for safety." Sophia turned back to the portrait and removed the final strip of false glaze from the mouth. The original expression emerged fully, controlled, scarred, human. She covered the canvas at once with a black cloth before Augustus could see it. He heard the movement and looked toward the sound, but he did not step around the easel. Is it finished? Yes. Do I resemble the study? You resemble yourself. He absorbed the answer in silence. The invitations were sent that afternoon. They named Miss Sophia Redmayne as sole restorer. The same guests who had attended the first viewing were invited to return on the 2nd of June, along with selected art patrons Mr. Pritchard, Sedgley, Mr. Harcourt, and Lady Lydon. The oil study and both print states would be displayed openly. Lady Constance received her invitation through the same formal channel as everyone else. As Sophia prepared to leave, Augustus stood beside the covered portrait without touching it. "May I ask one thing?" he said. "You may ask. Will you stand beside me when the cloth is removed?" Sophia considered the difference between being placed beside a duke and choosing to stand there. "I will stand beside the work," she said, "and beside the truth of my name." Augustus lowered his head. "Then I will stand beside both." For a moment, neither moved. His hand rested near the edge of the easel. Sophia placed her fingers lightly beside it, not beneath his and not in surrender. The backs of their hands touched. He did not close the distance until she turned her palm. Then his fingers met hers for one brief, restrained moment before she stepped away. The portrait remained covered. Augustus remained ignorant of its final face. For the first time since Sophia had entered Norchester House, he trusted what he could not control. On the 2nd of June, the long gallery of Norchester House filled without music. No quartet softened the silence. No supper diverted the eye. The guests had been invited to an artist's conversazione, and every object in the room demanded attention. At one end of the gallery, the signed oil study rested upon a velvet-covered stand. The date, the 19th August 1856, remained visible in Sedgley's hand. Beside it, Harcourt had placed the first state mezzotint proof, which showed the cruel likeness without Sophia's name, and the second state proof, which carried the false attribution beneath the same image. The copper plate remained inside a locked case at the solicitor's table until it was required. At the center of the gallery, the restored portrait stood beneath a black cloth. Augustus had not seen it. He entered with the last guests and stopped beside the very place where society had laughed 5 weeks earlier. This time he did not keep his unscarred side toward the room. The light from the tall windows fell across the left temple, the narrowed eye, the cheek, and the scar that disappeared beneath his cravat. Several guests looked away. More forced themselves not to. Lady Constance stood near the front in dark blue silk, her posture as composed as though she had arranged the gathering herself. Sedgley waited beside Mr. Pritchard, the printer, with the pale anger of a man who had agreed to confession only because silence had become more dangerous. Lady Lydon stood at Sophia's right. Mr. Vale remained near the household records. Sophia wore a gown of muted green and no ornament except a small ivory palette brooch that had belonged to her father. She did not stand behind Augustus. She stood beside the covered work. Mr. Harcourt opened the gathering by stating the purpose in plain terms. The portrait, its preliminary study, the printed reproductions, and the restored surface will be shown in their documented order. Every object has remained under witnessed custody. No one mistook the sentence for entertainment. Sophia stepped toward the oil study. This is the likeness His Grace approved last August. Her voice carried without strain. The scars are present. The expression is restrained. The flesh tones are warmer. The mouth is not altered into contempt. She moved to the first state proof. This print was made from the cruel version before my name appeared anywhere beneath it. Then she indicated the second. This state carries the same image, but adds a false claim that I directed the correction. A woman who had laughed at the first unveiling lowered her fan. A gentleman near the windows examined the two captions as though typography might excuse him from memory. Sophia did not accuse the room. She allowed the sequence to do what anger could not. Augustus looked at Sedgley. "Mr. Sedgley." The painter swallowed. I added the darker surface glazes after the principal layers had dried. His voice was audible, though stripped of confidence. I believed the portrait required greater force. "Did His Grace approve those alterations?" Mr. Harcourt asked. "No." "Did you authorize the first mezzotint?" "Yes." "Did you deny that any reproduction existed?" "Yes." A restless movement passed through the guests. Sedgley looked toward Constance before continuing. "I also allowed the second caption to be engraved. Lady Constance assured me that House Duncombe would continue its patronage if Miss Redmayne's name were attached." Mr. Pritchard stepped forward. Ink had settled into the lines of his fingers despite careful washing. The first state was already complete before Miss Redmayne's name was supplied. I had never met her. Lady Constance approved the wording for the second state, and Mr. Sedgley did not object. Constance's chin lifted. A printer under ducal pressure will say whatever preserves his shop. Sophia turned to her. The first state proof was preserved in his workshop before His Grace knew it existed. The second state proof was taken from the supper. The plate shows where the later caption was engraved. No one needs to accept a convenient memory when the objects retain the order. Mr. Harcourt unlocked the case. Pritchard lifted the copper plate by its protected edges and placed it beneath the gallery light. The added caption line was visible below the image. Constance looked at it only once. "You speak of order," she said, as though order and truth were the same. Sophia placed one hand upon the black cloth. "No, truth is what remains when the invention is removed." She drew the cloth away. The gallery fell silent. The scars remained. They crossed the painted face with the same pale irregularity Augustus carried in life. The left eye was still narrowed. The mark along the jaw still descended toward the neck. Sophia had not softened them into politeness. She had not warmed the skin into false youth or lifted the mouth into reassurance. Yet the manufactured menace was gone. The blackened hollow around the eye had disappeared. The dead grey cast had lifted. The mouth rested in controlled weariness rather than cruelty. The portrait showed a man who had endured, not a monster produced for society's appetite. Augustus stared at it. His breath caught once. He did not move closer. He looked first at the painted face, then at Sophia. "You kept them," he said. "They were never the lie," she replied. Lady Constance gave a quiet, disbelieving laugh. "So, this is the great correction. A scarred man made noble by a woman's sentimental hand." Augustus stepped into the center of the gallery. The scarred side of his face remained toward the guests. "No," he said. "A man made recognizable after you arranged for him to be mocked." Constance's composure sharpened. "I arranged for shallow women to reveal themselves. I showed them what war had made of you before any ambitious creature could pretend surprise after marriage." Her gaze cut towards Sophia. "This woman would have separated you from the only person willing to protect you from pity." "You did not protect me from pity," Augustus said. You made fear more useful to you. The words struck deeper, because he did not raise his voice. Constance looked around the gallery, seeking the social ground that had always held beneath her feet. I approved the caption because Miss Redmayne needed to be exposed. She entered this house through a commission and expected to leave with influence. I left with my name damaged and your money refused, Sophia said. That is not ambition. It is a boundary you failed to recognize. Constance turned on Augustus. You will regret humiliating your family for a tradeswoman. House Duncombe was humiliated when it used my scars as a warning and her name as a weapon. He faced Mr. Vale. Lady Constance no longer holds authority over this house, its invitations, commissions, subscriptions, or patronage. Her London apartments are to be vacated within 2 weeks. Her personal settlement and courtesy title remain untouched. She will not represent House Duncombe again. Constance's face emptied of colour. No one intervened. Rank could protect her title. It could not preserve power Augustus no longer granted. He turned to Sedgley. The commission is cancelled. The unearned balance will not be paid. Mr. Harcourt will arrange repayment of monies received for unauthorized reproduction. Every future patron who asks for the facts will receive them. Sedgley bowed his head. Pritchard carried the copperplate to the solicitor's table. Before witnesses, he took a steel tool and scored a cancellation line across the lower field. The sound was brief and final. The plate remained intact, but no clean addition could be pulled from it again. Mr. Harcourt returned it to the locked case. Augustus then faced the guests. There is one further wrong to name. Sophia looked at him. At the print supper, I claimed Miss Redmayne merely followed my instructions. I believed I was protecting her. In truth, I erased her judgment because I feared scandal more than I trusted her authority. When she objected, I removed her name and her choice. That failure was mine. No one shifted. No fan opened. Augustus turned towards Sophia. Miss Redmayne restored the portrait. She preserved the evidence. She traced the print without using my title as a threat. She restored the truth when this house did not. Lady Lyden's eyes shone, though her expression remained proud rather than tearful. An elderly collector approached Sophia first and asked for her card. Then the wife of the Royal Academician requested an appointment regarding a damaged family portrait. Others followed, not with applause, but with the more durable acknowledgement of work offered, names remembered, and judgment revised. When the gallery had begun to empty, Augustus remained beside Sophia and the restored portrait. I will not ask you for marriage in the room where your name was used against you, he said quietly. I have no right to make love another public correction. Sophia looked at the living scar, then at its painted likeness. What are you asking? Permission to court you openly, properly, without tying affection to employment, gratitude, or rescue. And if I refuse? The portrait remains yours in authorship. Your name remains restored. Nothing is withdrawn. She held his gaze long enough to test the promise. Then you may court me. Relief entered his face without breaking its restraint. Thank you. Do not thank me yet, Your Grace. Courtship is not forgiveness completed. No, he said. It is the opportunity to earn what cannot be commanded. After the last guest left, Augustus stood before the portrait alone with Sophia. He studied the scars, the fatigue, and the control she had allowed to remain. It is the first likeness in which I recognize the man who returned home, he said. Sophia looked at the portrait beside him. That man was always there. By the time Sophia Redmayne entered St. George's, Hanover Square, on the 7th October 1857, 4 months had passed since Augustus first asked permission to court her. He had spent those months proving that the question had not been another form of command. He called at Leyden House during proper hours. He accepted Lady Leyden's presence without treating it as inconvenience. He asked about Sophia's commissions and listened to the answers. When she disagreed with him, he did not mistake resistance for disloyalty. Their engagement had been announced. On the 12th of August, only after Sophia had accepted him privately, without guests, spectacle, or any promise tied to her work. The wedding itself was dignified rather than grand. Lady Leyden stood close enough to reach Sophia with one hand. Several of Augustus's former officers occupied the forward pews. Men who looked at the scars on his face without curiosity because they remembered the man before them. No one from Bath attended. Lady Constance had left Norchester House within the 2 weeks Augustus had given her. She retained her courtesy title, her personal settlement, and the rooms she had secured in Bath. But she no longer issued invitations, directed patronage, or spoke for House Duncombe. Sophia had not answered the first letter Constance sent after leaving London. Augustus had not asked her to. Reginald Sedgeley had repaid the disputed balance through Mr. Harcourt and lost several important patrons when the facts of the unauthorized prince became known. His name had not vanished from society, but neither had consequence. That was enough. Sophia had wanted justice, not ruin for its own sake. Augustus waited at the altar with the scarred side of his face turned toward the nave. He did not lower his head when Sophia approached. He looked at her as he had learned to look during the final sittings. Directly, without apology for being seen. When the clergyman asked the questions required of them, Augustus spoke with steady clarity. Sophia answered with the same. The ring he placed upon her hand was plain gold, chosen because she had refused jewels selected to announce a duchess before they honored the woman. When the ceremony ended, she was no longer Miss Redmayne. She was Sophia Duncombe, Duchess of Norchester. Yet the title did not swallow her name. Outside the church, a small gathering waited beside the carriages. There were no cheering crowds and no arranged display of triumph. Lady Leyden kissed Sophia's cheek and whispered, "You are still allowed to correct a duke when necessary." Sophia glanced toward Augustus. "I expect frequent opportunities." He heard her and offered his arm. "I've been warned." The contraction in his voice made Lady Leyden laugh. It was not the brittle laughter of the long gallery in April. It asked nothing from anyone's pain. Augustus and Sophia remained in London that night, then departed the next morning for Kent. The journey to Rookwood Abbey took several hours by railway and estate carriage. The restored portrait did not travel with them. After the public viewing in June, it had remained at Norchester House while the cleaned surface stabilized. In August, Sophia supervised the application of a protective varnish. Only when that layer had settled did the household prepare the canvas for transport. It left London in a padded, covered wagon attended by 2 experienced men and arrived at Rookwood on the morning of the 9th of October, 1 day after its owners. The abbey rose from the Kent countryside in pale stone, older and less severe than Norchester House. Its towers had been softened by centuries of rain. Its long western windows admitted a warm autumn light that moved slowly across oak floors and ancestral portraits. Augustus had prepared a north light studio for Sophia in a quiet wing overlooking the gardens. The room contained wide work tables, lockable cabinets, adjustable easels, and shelves for pigments and tools. Nothing had been chosen without asking her. The commission books would be hers to accept or refuse. The household accounts would pay for maintenance, but no steward would control whom she painted or what she restored. On their first morning at Rookwood, Sophia found a brass plate fixed discreetly beside the studio door. It read simply, Her Grace's Studio. No decorative title, no claim that the work belonged to the duchy rather than to her. Augustus watched from the corridor while she examined the room. The east window can be altered if the morning light is too strong, he said. The north window is sufficient. She touched the edge of the central table. You remembered the height. You complained about Sedgley's tables for nearly a month. I mentioned them twice. Both times were convincing. She turned toward him. And if I accept commissions from families you dislike, then I will dislike them from another room. Progress, she said. Remarkable progress. By noon, the restored portrait had been carried into the West Picture Gallery, the same canvas that had once hung beneath candlelight at Norchester House now rested on a heavy easel, while the house, steward, and 2 footmen awaited instruction. The signed oil study had already been placed in the House Duncombe picture archive. The 2 mezzotint proofs and cancelled copper plate remained under Mr. Harcourt's custody with the legal correspondence. They were evidence, not decoration. Only the portrait had come home. Augustus stood before it for several minutes. There is a private corridor beyond the library, he said. The light is controlled. Fewer people pass through it. Sophia heard the old instinct beneath the practical words. The portrait was truthful now, but truth could still feel dangerous when placed where anyone might see it. She did not answer for him. Is that where you want it? He looked toward the west wall, where generations of Duncombe faces watched from gilded frames. I thought it might be safer. That was not my question. His mouth shifted with recognition. She had once asked him to let her choose her own risk. Now she offered him the same dignity. Augustus crossed the gallery and stood beneath an empty space between the portrait of his grandfather and a broad landscape of Rookwood's southern grounds. Afternoon light reached the wall without striking it harshly. Here, he said, in the public gallery. Because you think you should? Sophia asked. Because I don't want survival hidden in a corridor. The footman lifted the portrait. Under the steward's direction, it was secured upon the west wall. The household had been invited to view it after luncheon. They entered by rank, not as spectators at a curiosity, but as members of the house whose history now included the image. The butler came first, followed by the housekeeper, senior servants, footmen, maids, grooms, and estate clerks. No one laughed. No one praised the scars as though endurance required performance. They looked at the duke they knew. They looked at the artist who had become their duchess. Then, one by one, they bowed or curtsied and left the gallery to its quiet. Augustus and Sophia remained. Autumn light moved across the floor until it reached the portrait. It touched the painted scar at the temple, followed the pale line over the cheek, and rested along the jaw. The same light crossed Augustus's living face. For a moment, the man and the likeness carried the mark together. He did not turn away. Sophia stood beside him with a faint stain of umber, still visible, near one fingernail from work begun that morning in her new studio. Augustus took her hand, enclosing those paint-marked fingers in his own. "Do you regret keeping them?" he asked, looking at the portrait. "The scars? Any of it?" Sophia leaned gently against his shoulder. "No, I removed what was false." He looked down at her, and what remained? She turned her gaze toward the painted face. then back to the man whose hand held hers without restraint or possession, what was always worthy of being seen.